I'm just gonna place these babies right here for the sake of today's video. But if you are like, I clicked on this video, I do not know what you're talking about. What the hell is the absolute universe? Well, me, myself, Jessie, and here at the Genius Nook, we're gonna break it down for you today. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing everything the absolute universe. We're going to be going through what it is, where it came from, how it came to be. We're gonna go through what is it, the point, what are the different absolute series, what I think is the most powerful thing about the commentary the absolute series is trying to make. And finally, I'm going to give you my Jessie Genius Nook approved guide or reading order for the absolute series. When I think about the absolute universe, the last bit of the Metro Booming song Around Me featuring Don Toliver, and the bit that Morgan Freeman reads out where he goes, "Heroes are inspired, emerging only when needed, revealing themselves to the world in a moment. Marked by a realization of their ultimate destiny, with backs against the wall, they ascend the winding path of their own fate." So for those who are unfamiliar with what the absolute universe is, the absolute universe is a DC Elseworlds title. And by Elseworlds, I mean we have the main time stream, the main continuity with all of the heroes as we know and love them, and it's a separate title that has broken off as a separate branch. Think of it like an alternate universe, okay, with characters that have alternate origin stories that face different things. There are a multitude of DC Elseworlds titles. For example, a really popular one at the moment, I think, is Gotham by Gaslight, where we're taken back to like medieval times and all of these heroes are reimagined within medieval context, okay? That is what we mean by DC Elseworlds title. In the absolute universe, the DC Elseworlds takes place in what we call this Alpha universe. And this is a world born from the cosmic fallout of the Dark Knight's death metal events. So this is following the events of what happens in Absolute Power. And basically Darkseid essentially gets himself intentionally emmed off by Superman because he feels like my end is coming, okay? And then because of this, his spiritual energy is reborn in this empty alpha world, which eventually becomes the absolute universe. You don't have to know this too much. You don't have to deep it too much. If you'd like to understand it, you can go and read Absolute Power series, but that's pretty much all you need to know. And it represents this notion and idea as Scott Snyder, the creator of this universe. Yes, Scott Snyder, the GOAT, one of my personal favorite comic book writers ever. Like when I'm thinking about like the greatest of all times in terms of DC Comics, I'm thinking Graf Rucka, I'm thinking Geoff Johns, I'm thinking Scott Snyder. Like those are the people I'm like, they changed the way we envision, encapsulate, and interact with the world in DC. Anyway, so it's this idea of small chaos fighting corrupt systems rather than being the systems themselves. So we are introduced to heroes that are stripped essentially of key parts of what makes them special in the main time stream. So for example, we have an absolute Batman and he's not a billionaire. He doesn't have all of this amazing wealth, and instead he is this blue-collar, normal worker, civil engineer who relies on raw physical power, local community, and brutal DIY aesthetic, okay, to fight against the corrupt systems involved in this place, okay? In terms of absolute Superman, he ended up growing up on Krypton, and he was there and remembers the destruction of Krypton and the corruption that led to the people of Krypton not being saved, okay? He arrives on Earth much later, and he doesn't grow up in the sweet, idyllic home of Smallville and with the Kents. Rather, he is an immigrant that is treated like, unfortunately, many immigrants in our own world is. He survives by being an independent working class person, but the world deeply fears who he is. We have absolute Wonder Woman, and she wasn't raised in Themyscira with the supportive sisters of the Amazons to, really imbue her with her sense of morality and safety and her opinions. Rather, she is raised in the literal pits of hell by the witch Circe, okay? We have absolute Flash, who is Wally West in this case, and gained super speed through a volatile accident in a government facility. But his speed, unlike the Flash that we expect in the mainstream timeline, is very wild and unstable and causes destructive energy waves that he struggles to control, and he's essentially a fugitive from the government. We have absolute Martian Manhunter, where which I think is the most interesting pick, where John Jones is like a real normal human being, okay? And after surviving a serious head injury, he is invaded and possessed by a non-physical entity known as the Martian. And it's really giving body horror in the coolest way and has some of the best art. I'm so obsessed with the art and how they're representing, this very surreal experience of him being confused and losing his identity to the said Martian. We have absolute Green Lantern. There is no emotional spectrum this time. Instead, the cosmic energies are based on steps towards this idea of spiritual enlightenment. We have our heroes, where Abin Sur comes down to Earth, or Evergreen, this small town in Nevada, and it is basically handing out judgments to different people, which causes the world, or their town as they know it, to spiral. And for them, both Hal and the main Green Lantern in this world, Joe Mullen, to basically interact in conflict. I don't want to spoil it. I'm trying my best to really not spoil it. And all of these take on different forms. What's also super interesting to me is also the villains and how the villains have changed, not only the heroes. You know, instead of Batman being the billionaire, the Joker is this massive, sadistic billionaire. We have Absolute Superman, where Ra's al Ghul, also known as Godhead, again, is a hyper-wealthy CEO of Lazarus Corp. And he runs this tyrannical global conglomerate that controls developing nations, farms, and mines. And he uses an army called the Peacemakers to crack down on workers. He views humanity as leeches and wants to try and get and control the Superman to cleanse the planet, with Brainiac being this AI that is cold and emotionless and hands out judgments and orders to these peacemakers, okay? We have Wonder Woman, and her villain is Veronica Kell. Again, she's a high-ranking national security advisor who wants to capture and use these supervillains to keep the world in this particular order. I can go through each one in its own detail, but all of the villains, again, are shaping a very specific picture of this absolute world. And I think the creators are intentionally mirroring our contemporary exhaustion with the systems that we have in place, with our reactions to the people in power, and how we react as a society to those people in power. I think Superman, you know, is a massive commentary on this immigrant experience. He's treated unfairly. He witnesses the unfair treatment of the working class. It is this extractionary principle of Ra's al Ghul using this unfeeling AI to extract labor and police the marginalized. I also think this is like a direct commentary on algorithmic oppression. What happens when justice system abdicates human empathy in replacement of absolute corporate cold order in this pursuit of money per se. You know, the use of Brainiac being this AI tool that is cold and emotionless, I think is a commentary on technocratic policing. And now I've been reading Pope Leo's recent encyclica, not because I'm Catholic by any means, but because I want to do a podcast episode of it. This is for my time to do my own self-promo. If you love my voice and you love breaking down some of these more serious topics, whether it's science or politics or anything of the sort, go and check out my podcast, Female Genius. It is like having a late night chat with your philosophy, science obsessed friend. And in a recent episode in the next coming weeks, I'm going to be breaking down the Pope's encyclica and all of the different commentaries he makes on humanity and where humanity is going. And there is a massive section in this Pope's encyclica on AI. And within that encyclica, he basically warns that AI tools lack the human conscience and reduce human beings to being mere functional, expendable entities in the name of profit. And that's exactly how Brainiac and Ra's al Ghul interact within the Absolute Superman universe. And we have this immigrant that is trying to fight against this very oppressive system. When we look towards the Bat, you know, in the mainstream timeline, Bruce Wayne is the ultimate fantasy of philanthropic capitalism. He represents the ideal that if a billionaire is good enough, they can save the city, okay? In the Absolute Universe, I think they come something closer to our actual reality, where the Joker is a billionaire and it strips away this comfort of the idea of philanthropic capitalism. You know, the Joker is a billionaire that reflects modern anxiety. That true chaotic nihilist doesn't look like a clown in a purple suit robbing banks and doing crazy unpredictable things. It looks like untouchable tech executives using systemic wealth, medical technology, and institutional leverage to manipulate society to their own amusement or to their own benefit. Within the comics of Absolute Evil, which I'll explain what that is when I'm going over my list, the Joker himself, or this version of the Joker, says that, you know, he hates how people fall into the fallacy of the just world fallacy, which is this philosophical idea that the world is supposed to be just and we should work and move towards society where everybody is treated fairly. And this Joker absolutely does not believe in it. He believes there is systems in place where some people are in power and some people aren't, and that's just how the world works. And the people in power decide who gets what and how the world deserves to be treated. And that's what that is. And that encapsulates a lot of the ideas that we see within the billionaires and the trillionaire within our own world. We see Martian Manhunter and Green Lantern, okay? You know, I think Martian Manhunter kind of in this idea of having this thing living within his consciousness all the time is very much a big commentary on fractured identity and social media. We see across different body horrors, specifically within movies and the film landscape, that the whole purpose of body horror is about how it feels and confronting these ideals in many different ways about losing bodily autonomy. Whereas the Martian in the Martian Manhunter, or Absolute Martian Manhunter, is this idea of losing control of one's mind, losing control of one's attention, losing control on what someone deems important and unimportant, okay? And I think that because of social media, because the way these big conglomerates are trying to capitalize on our attention and the things that they're trying to distract us on, I think Martian Manhunter, guys can say I'm stretching, serves as an ultimate commentary on that. You know, the things that we absorb daily and the fact that we are externalizing and our own consciousness and getting other people to decide what our morality is, to decide what we believe in, to decide what we like, to decide what we want to eat, okay? And I think it's the ultimate body horror of the loss of personal agency in the hands of something invisible, uncontrollable. It really reminds me of, I always reference this because it's one of my favorite extended essays by Neil Postman called Amusing Ourselves to Death, where he basically says that he compares society, or the direction of society, to 1984 / Brave New World, two very big books in dystopian hallmarks, but have two very different directions on the way society is going to go. With the 1984 world being that we are going to fall under oppression. You know, nobody is going to want to read. He's talking about reading in this case. Nobody's going to want to read or think for themselves because it's going to be scary and we're going to be banned from doing so. Whereas Brave New World is going to be, we are going to be so distracted that we are going to be unable to read, or nobody would want to read, or nobody would want to think for themselves. And I feel like it's leaning towards this Brave New World scenario, and I think that's what Absolute Martian Manhunter is leaning towards, okay? We have, for example, Green Lantern, Absolute Green Lantern, where we have this cosmic entity that crashes into Earth, okay? And it breeds a system, an intentionally constructed system of spiritual manipulation and this existential panic. I think it comments directly on how powerful institutions use fear and strict dogma, this promise of so-called enlightenment, to control a desperate population that has been left vulnerable by the wealthy elites. You guys can say it's a stretch, okay? I think The Absolute Flash is a commentary on the institutional exploitation of the young and how this idea of the Flash can't control his powers and is always running from something, I think largely represents the anxiety of our current generation inheriting a very unstable, hyper-accelerated world that we can barely control and grasp within our own hands, okay? And now that brings me to Absolute Wonder Woman, okay? And why I think within this whole universe, she is the key and the one I want to draw out the most. When we look at mainstream, and when I say mainstream, in the main time continuity, not like mainstream as in like she's cool. Wonder Woman is, this Absolute Wonder Woman, look at her. I'm so sorry. Look at her. She's so cool. She's genuinely like, I gag. She's so cool. I think about her all the time. Mainstream Diana comes from a utopian paradise. And so it makes it quite easy for Diana, as she's growing, as she's developing, as she's becoming a fighter, a warrior, a diplomat, to give her pristine moral clarity. It makes sense why she has such strong ideals. It makes sense why she has the ideals that she has, given the environment that she's raised in. Absolute Diana subverts this, not by changing her character, not by changing her morals or her ideals, okay? You know, Absolute Superman has less hope. He's very distinctively different, you know. Absolute Batman is a lot grittier, it's a lot darker. Absolute Flash is less funny, he's confused. Like, I feel like a lot of the characters, in stripping certain parts of them away, we've stripped different things that we see associated with their mainstream timeline. That's not to say that their representations are less powerful, but what I think is so interesting, and I would love to talk to the writer and hear about what their opinion on this is, about why, because, you know, we've stripped her, we've made her been raised in the literal depths of hell, and she still maintains this sense of morality, the sense of like clarity of who she is as a person, what she believes in, and the values that she stands by, right? Even aside from the Amazons. And that is something, you know, this Diana isn't unique in her character. She's unique in her upbringing. She's unique in the situation she faces against. She's unique in her fat, massive sword. But in terms of her character, it feels like the Diana we've always met and known and loved. It feels like Diana that we understand. And in spite of the fact that she's coming from like the literal depths of hell, okay, that fierce dignity and moral clarity has not left her. It is the ultimate testament that resilience in a world that demands so much from us and is so wicked, that this notion that I was speaking about in the beginning, that true heroism isn't born from this immaculate, sheltered privilege. It is forged by maintaining and standing up for others despite every reason to be cynical. She is the ideal hero because she knows how dark the world has got. She's seen the world in its darkest form, but she chooses to fight anyways. And I think that is literally it. And all of these different characters, despite all of the terrible cards they've been dealt, in all of their situations, they are choosing to fight in this dark, gritty, dark side imbued world where there are so many massive systemic oppressions, and the benefits and the, strengths that these characters have in terms of what they might have physically or their inherent character have been stripped away, they still stand up and fight. And within a world where it seems increasingly so that these massive systemic powers are so huge and against us, I think the absolute world serves as a commentary and a reflection of our society intentionally to encourage us that real heroes are not inspired, they're not born. Real heroes are forged, they are not magically, chosen. This idea of the chosen one myth dies in the absolute universe. Nobody's chosen. They have just decided, I am going to be the one to stand up if nobody wants to. Okay, heroism is a choice, it's not a privilege. It's not, wow, I have all of these powers, so I might as well. Wow, I have all of this money, we have a well. They're choosing to do it in spite of all of these things being stripped away from us. And I think this is like the genius of it, and that's why I'm so obsessed with it. And that's why, in the face of all of the different, it's not rare to have a story where they flip something off the character. We've had gender swaps. Have you guys seen the Twilight gender swap? These aren't rare things to have for the character. But what is intentional across this entire absolute universe timeline is the way it mirrors our own, and what I think the social commentaries that it's trying to make. Obviously, I could be stretching. The writers can come out. I was like, nah, we just wanted to write a cool story. But I don't think so. Anyway, to finish this off, I'm going to tell you guys what my perfect reading order is. Now, to be honest, I think there are 3 different ways. You can do my way, which is the best way. It's the genius way, okay? Or you can decide to read it chronologically based off of time. So just based off of release. You go through all of the different issues. Maybe you're going to pick one absolute hero and you read all of their issues that have been released so far, and then you go on to the next one, and then you go on to the next one. That's how a lot of people have been reading it. That's how I kind of got into it. I started with Absolute Wonder Woman and I just went from there. Okay, but now that I've read pretty much majority of them, I think this is the best way to get into it, in my opinion. Okay, in my opinion. I think everybody has their own different reading orders. My recommendation is, though, if you are brand new to the world of DC and you're like, I don't know, I think the Absolute Universe is also a really good place to start because it's so self-contained. I feel like with main time continuities, so much stuff has happened, and so I feel like it feels very overwhelming to kind of dive in deep with some of the characters going on, but a lot of these are starting from ground point zero. And of course, it's interesting when you sit down and understand a character and able to compare a character's original origin story to what's changed, but that doesn't change or take away from the story being really interesting. So this is an amazing place to start if you want to get reading comics and you want to get into it. These are some of the best-selling comics books right now, and it's so rare for a DC Elseworld title, outside of the big 3, to be sweeping the charts. It's serious, guys. Okay, so I would recommend you start with Absolute Evil. Now, the reason why Absolute Evil is one issue, and it basically collects and takes all of the villains across the different Absolute series and brings them into one comic and how they interact, and it basically exposes to you what's going on systemically and gathers all these powers. Now, I see Absolute Evil like a flashback, and when you read it, it might be like, I don't know who all of these people are, I don't know, it's confused, but I think it allows you to understand this is systemic. It really introduces to there is a larger field at play and something's going on. It gives you little teasers into what's going on in the different Absolute stories, and I think it's such a good point to start with that one, because then as you're reading all of the other comics, you're like, wow, okay, this is serious. This is controversial. A lot of people would recommend that you read Absolute Evil after a bunch of issues, but I'm gonna say start off with it. It's interesting, it's cool. It's like, who are these people? Oh my god, wait, that's that character? That's that character? Where does that character come from? And then I would recommend to start off with Absolute Wonder Woman. Straight away, I think Absolute Wonder Woman is the coolest. I think It really has such an amazing storyline. I would recommend you start with the first 6 issues of Absolute Wonder Woman. I would then recommend you do Absolute Superman. Again, I think it's because a lot of people understand Superman as a character. They know his origin story. There's been a billion Superman movies. So I think it then becomes quite obvious, like, okay, this is what we're subverting. Not a lot of people are familiar with Absolute Wonder Woman's storyline. So that's why I would say that, and read the first 6 issues of Absolute Superman. I would then say go on to Absolute Batman, and I put Absolute Batman as the last of the Trinity. Honestly, I think you could read any of the Trinity, so Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, in any order, but I think Batman hits harder when you really get what's going on. By the time you've read the first 6 issues of Absolute Superman and you get to the first issue of Absolute Batman, you are aware of what's good. This world is not normal, and it really allows you to lean into all of the differences and changes in this darker, can you believe, grittier Gotham. I would then say go on to read Absolute Martian Manhunter, the first 6 issues. Very different style, beautiful storytelling through the art, beautiful storyline, very different style, very self-contained, because again, this is a body horror and the villain isn't necessarily, I mean, the villain's still the government, but like the villain isn't necessarily as overt. I think the larger conversation is about the Martian being in John Jones' body rather than him fighting this big evil in of itself. I would then say you can then go on to read Absolute Flash and Absolute Green Lantern, and then go from there. I think then just continue to read whatever you find interesting. Absolute Green Arrow, I think you could read that at any point, but I would recommend you read it after you read this first 6 issues of like Superman, Batman, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, then read Absolute Green Arrow, and then you can go from whichever ones and storylines you have interesting. It seems that we're building up to a massive crossover event, and some of the characters, like for example, Absolute Wonder Woman and Absolute Batman have met. So like these characters are slowly starting to meet. There's been references to all of them. So this is a brilliant time to catch up. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on anything that I've said. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you think I'm thinking too much, but I would love to have this conversation in the comment section below, because that's my favorite thing to do. I also, okay, this is like my little channel update. My plan is to do one proper sit down video like this a month. Hopefully, like, you know, yapping about comics or anime or whatever thing I want to sit down and analyze. That's not science related, because that all happens on Female Genius. So do check out Female Genius. But it takes me so long to edit. I'm such a bit of a perfectionist and plan these videos. So it's just harder to do more than one a month. So I really want to introduce a second layer of Genius Nook where it's unedited. It's me, I don't know, oh, should I do a gaming thing? Oh, I can't game, but like gaming or doing something of the sort, and then, you know, like talking about maybe book series that I've read, a comic series, an anime, something a little bit more conversational, something a little bit more casual, and we can interact in that way. I don't know if I should just do a live stream. I don't know. Tell me what I should do, guys. And also make sure you guys check out me on TikTok, because that is where we have a lot of fun. I post the most regularly on TikTok, unfortunately, because I'm always on the app. That includes book recommendations, that includes conversations about, you know, movies and film and my ideas for different TV shows. And yeah, I think I'm starting to figure out what my niche is. I think my niche is just nerdy polymath. That's what it is. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time on the Genius Nook.